Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Nick Files. I'm your host Nick Muley. No, it's been kind of a little while since I've done an episode of the show. Been about 2 weeks since the last episode, so I do apologize for not really saying, putting a lot of announcements out about what's been going on with the show. 2 weeks ago, I had this really major headache that I was unable to do the show that night, and then of course last week, I think as many of you guys know, we were also I was also on the way to New York. But fortunately, now that I'm finally back home, I can finally start doing the show again, and it's definitely good to be back on. So anyways, uh tonight's episode, or I need to stop saying tonight because it's still considered daylight outside. Today's episode we'll be focusing on a location called Timberline Lodge. So we're just gonna get right to business very quickly. Just before I do, however, I just want to give a quick shout outs. Oh God, no, don't Brad, don't even start. Well, from the paranormal cockroach side of things. What's going on, Natalie? Good to see you. And yes, Brad, I have to admit, the music box you gave me, it is awesome. You know what? If I do have time, possibly, depending on if I can do this, I might even show the music box. Unfortunately, I do have my toolbox right nearby, so but I'll try to do that maybe a little bit later. But anyways, like I said, for today we're going to be focusing on a location called Timberline Lodge. So let me get the presentation set. Okay, and again, I always have this trouble literally like every single time. I always have issues sometimes connecting with the presentation. So give me 1 second here so I could damn it. Hang on. Technical issue here. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. All right. My reaction was priceless. All right, hang on 1 second. Let me try this again. Just make sure this works. Okay. Hopefully this is gonna. All right, well, I got it connected, but just need to make sure it's showing up on the screen. Oh, and also while I'm waiting for this to yeah, we're on. While we're waiting for this to load, two announcements I just wanted to bring up. First off, one of the networks that usually I do broadcasts, for some reason I'm having issues connecting to StreamYard. So unfortunately, I won't be able to broadcast on RU Media Network today. So I did reach out to the page to see what's been going on, but they haven't sent anything. So hopefully I'll hear from them later tonight. But for today's episode, though, I won't be able to go on RU Media this time. And also, again, I know some of you guys probably know this already, but last night we lost not only a fellow paranormal sister of ours within our paranormal family, but also a good friend of mine, Jan Mary, who passed away from cancer yesterday evening. So I just want to give a quick shout out, for her family. Our prayers and hearts go out to you, and of course also to Jan's friends. But we're gonna miss her. We're gonna miss her. She was a great, fun, and certainly funny member of this paranormal family. It's just not going to be the same without her anymore. So I know a lot of you guys, watching now have never met her, but knowing her personally, she was great whenever we had Paracons. So rest in peace. Anyways, we got the screen right. Okay, so we got the presentation ready. So we'll get right down to business. And as I said, so we're going to be focusing on Timberline Lodge, which I'm sure a couple of you guys are probably familiar with this location because this, of course, played a role exterior shot wise for a particular movie. And of course, it's one we've already spoken about in the last presentation and the presentation before that. So, the history of the Timberline Lodge. Timberline Lodge, a mountain lodge and resort hotel, is a 4-story structure of about 40,000 square feet, located just over an hour outside of Portland, Oregon, in Government Camp. The ground level exterior walls are heavy rubble masonry, using boulders from the immediate area, and heavy timber is used from the first floor up. The central head house section is hexagonal and 60 feet in diameter, with a six-sided stone chimney stacked 90 feet high and 14 feet in diameter. Each of the six fireplace openings, three on the ground floor, three on the first floor, is 5 feet wide and 7 feet high. Two wings running west and southeast flank the head house. Oregon woods used throughout the building include cedar, Douglas fir, hemlock, western juniper, or juniper, I guess that's how. See, I've always had issues with that one, and ponderosa pine. Inside is a living museum of arts and crafts, inspired by pioneer Indian and wildlife themes. It is situated at 6,000 feet on the south slope of Mount Hood, Oregon's tallest mountain. The Work Progress Administration, WPA, built the lodge during the Great Depression of the 1930s, amid the great economic calamity that affected most of the world, using unemployed laborers and local materials. Crafts include both carved and inlaid wood, wrought iron, weaving, applique, painting, mosaic, carved linoleum, and stained glass. The lodge is a grand example of Cascadian architecture. Developed during the crisis of the Great Depression, Timberline Lodge is an iconic property deep-seated in the heritage of America, symbolizing the nation's optimism and resourcefulness to facilitate growth and progress during a severe economic downturn. As early as the 1880s, people were thinking about building lodges on Mount Hood. In 1889, W.M. Ladd and CES Wood built Cloud Cap Inn on the east side of the forest, providing lodging to those early recreation enthusiasts. Which surprisingly, I couldn't find any photographs of like these lodges that they had. I don't know if it was because word just really didn't get much out, at that era. Like, not too many people may have said a lot, but strangely enough, I was unable to find photographs, from the 1880s of these lodges that once did exist, including Cloud Cap Inn. Visitors had to travel by railroad to Hood River, then take a stagecoach via a toll road to reach this rustic lodge near the timberline of the north side and a beautiful spot close to the mountain. Periodically, people proposed new lodges at this location, including John Yan. Over the next 30 years, as Portland's population increased, so did recreation on the mountain. The idea of building an alpine lodge on the slopes of Mount Hood had seen so many incarnations over the years, but the one that was ultimately successful was spearheaded by a well-connected Portland businessman named Emerson J. Griffith. Okay, I was trying to figure out where that photo was. Griffith had been trying for the better part of the 1920s to garner support from the construction of such a lodge. But when America's roaring 20s and the excesses that came with it came to a screeching halt after the stock market crash of 1929, Griffith's dwindling prospects for securing funding similarly dried up, and he feared such a lodge might never be built. In 1925, the state of Oregon, I need to start saying Oregon than Oregon, the state of Oregon constructed the Mount Hood Loop Highway, giving the public greater access to the area, which sealed the fate of the Northside Lodge. The need for a lodge on the south side of the mountain was identified. Several proposals were made to build a lodge on the south side because of the shorter travel time from Portland and the scenic views, plus the terrain on the south slope was more favorable to recreation. In the years that followed, the country's financial landscape was transformed from one of wealth and prosperity to one of desperation and poverty. But in 1933, during the deepest pits of the Great Depression, the U.S. government answered a call to action from its ambitious, newly elected president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and invested in itself, thereby starting a campaign to get America back to work at a time when it needed it most. Roosevelt's New Deal kickstarted the movement as numerous federal spending bills swiftly passed through Congress, providing much needed relief to many sectors of the struggling economy. To that end, in 1934, as ordered by Roosevelt, a bill creating the Works Progress Administration, WPA, was signed into law, was established as a program to stimulate the economy by funding state and city projects while employing the millions of citizens that were jobless as a result of the Great Depression. While mostly supporting public infrastructure projects, the Works Progress Administration also invests in archaeological projects, including excavation and preservation activities of historic sites. Between September 1933 and September 1935, various competing Portland business interests proposed that the government build a lodge that private enterprises would operate. The proposal was quite sketchy, but it proposed a winter sports recreation project. When the project was announced publicly, bonds were sold by the three sponsors of the project, which were the state of Oregon, Mount Hood Recreation Association of Portland, and the regional office of the Forest Service. 2 million men and women across the country were soon employed and working on a variety of local and national projects in the public interest. It wouldn't take long for the ripple effects to be felt in Oregon. In a fortuitous twist of fate, Emerson J. Griffith was appointed Oregon's regional administrator of Roosevelt's fledgling WPA in the spring of 1935 and obtained funding from the WPA for $246,893, approximately $4.3 million by today's standards, with additional funding from the Mount Hood Development Association and road improvement and building from the U.S. Forest Service. After raising $10,000 for building materials, the project was sponsored by the Work Progress Administration for an expected cost of $275,513 and would employ 220 men for 18 months. Before I continue, guys, I just want to check for comments here because, again, I do apologize that I'm not reading comments because, again, as usual, I'm unable to see them when I'm doing this. Natalie said it's not Things Network without technical glitches. What's going on, Jay? Good to see you. Okay. Now, finally, in September of that year, a formal request was made to Washington, D.C. by the Oregon administration of New Deal programs. Hang on, just got to check one final page. What's going on, Victoria? Robert, good to see you. Oh, you've been there. Interesting. What's going on, Tom? Good to see you. It's a Timberline Lodge in East Dubuque, Illinois. Maybe just a similar name. It doesn't say anything. I don't know which one is older, Tom, so I'm not sure which exactly came first, but that might be something to look up, however. Okay. Wait, did I already? Okay, yeah, I already did read that. Okay. Flush with a windfall of federal money and the authority to spend it, Griffith's first order of business was not surprisingly to move forward with plans to build an iconic mountain lodge on the southern slopes of Mount Hood. Griffith and the Mount Hood Development Association, MHDA, the organization that would operate the lodge once it was built, turned to seasoned architect Gilbert Stanley Underwood for the lodge's design. Now, unfortunately, again, despite a huge search, I was unable to find any, for some reason whatsoever, there are no photographs of Emerson Griffith. Why there isn't, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. So, but I was able to find obviously one of Gilbert Stanley Underwood. When the first WPA funds became available in December, the architect Gilbert Stanley Underwood, referred to as the Parkitect, is famously well known for being the principal architect of designing several prominent and grand lodges in many of the country's newly minted national park services, including Old Faithful Inn at Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming, the Lodge at Bryce Canyon, and Zion Lodge at Zion National Park in Utah, Yosemite's Ahwahnee Lodge at Yosemite National Park in California, and Grand Canyon Lodge, North Rim in Arizona, among others. Described as the standard for architecture on public lands, his rustic style was characterized by natural local materials and a design that blended into the landscape. He was selected as consulting architect. Underwood's style relied heavily on rustic natural materials, and his buildings aimed to highlight the true pioneer spirit of the American West. Incorporating massive logs, cedar shake, intricate stonework, and other indigenous materials found near the sites of these grand lodges, his national park style was heavily influenced by by classic Swiss chalets of the Alps, as well as the arts and crafts movement, with subtle a nod to the grand shingle-style homes of the East Coast, to name a few. Underwood's initial design for the lodge consisted of a central octagonal head house, as he called it, flanked by two asymmetrical wings, set off from one another at a dogleg angle of 90 degrees. The lodge would face the summit of the mountain, with its main entrance at the base of the head house. Mistype there. I gotta fix that. This design would later be amended by a local architect from Portland named W.I. Tim Turner, who had in fact submitted his own design for the lodge just weeks before Underwood. The two men differed on their interpretation of just how rustic the lodge should be, with Underwood favoring the more utilitarian version. Hopefully I got it, with little or no ornamentation, while Turner favored a more sophisticated approach with an emphasis on art. Underwood's design ultimately worn out, but not before a number of tweaks would be made by Turner. Turner had more intimate knowledge of Mount Hood and fine-tuned Underwood's design to take better advantage of the site's unique attributes. Turner felt that Underwood had underestimated the amount of snowfall that the mountain gets, over 20 feet annually, and sitting the lodge to face uphill, coupled with a 90-degree offset between the two wings, left it susceptible to prevailing winds and the massive snowdrifts that come with them. Among his many revisions were changing the octagonal head house to a hexagonal one, thereby realigning the angle of the dogleg from 90 degrees to 120 degrees, and reorienting the lodge so that it faced downhill. These alterations and many more, inside and out, would result in the Timberline Lodge that exists today. In January 1936, the project was in full planning mode. The first architectural drawings were started, and the ground was broken on June 11th of that same year. Tremendous political infighting as to who would design and operate the lodge. They were not even sure what the project was, but Portland business interests wanted a part of the action. Lots of questions. Would it be a day warming? Would it be a day? Would it be a day warming hut or a hotel? Would it be an economical or high-end hotel? who would use it, and for what. Finally, the Forest Service won, or assumed the right to design the entire project. The Forest Service and the state director of the WPA were able to pull off the largest recreation projects. Most projects were infrastructure projects. With funding by the Works Progress Administration, the local community, including Jack Meyer of the Mount Hood Development Association and Francis E. Scotty Williamson Jr. of the United States Forest Service, concept, con- conceptualized a ski resort and began construction of Timberline Lodge that year. Largely built by hand, using regional materials collected on site, including native timber and stone. Timberline Lodge was completed in an astounding 15 months. William I. Turner, Forest Service architect, used the term Cascadian architecture to describe the design of Timberline Lodge because the roof line with the steep pitch of the head house roof mimicked the nearby peak of Mount Hood, which kind of does make sense. I mean, if you look rather carefully, I mean, the way how they designed the roof, how it's literally like that of a mountain, that obviously is like, as I would probably kind of put it, like an homage, if you will, to like how Mount Hood looks like it being in a mountain itself. The overall design, combined with the use of regional native materials, created Cascadian architecture. Turner and Lynn Forrest, another Forest Service architect, took Underwood's original design and changed the head. Oh wait, that's odd. I guess didn't need to put that in because it's just repeating some of the stuff here. Took Underwood's original design and changed the head house from an octagon to a hexagon, which opened the wings. Just have to take that out later. The first phase of the lodge was to frame and roof the lodge in 4 months' time. Considering the altitude of 6,000 feet, the short summer season, and harsh alpine climates, this project was a challenge. Daily, there could be between 100 and 470 workers on site at a time. The WPA program aimed to employ and train as many people as possible. As a federal arts project and a master apprentice program, an additional purpose of the Lodge project was to purposely pair skilled artists and craftspeople with unskilled workers so as to teach them traditional skills in arts, crafts, and construction trades. Crews of 150 crews of 150 men were interchanged every 2 weeks, and craftsmen and artists were commissioned to work on the lodge, resulting in 760,000 person hours estimated worth of work. This project greatly helped the local economy by employing men who were unable to find work elsewhere due to the Great Depression. Wages were 90 cents an hour for building trade laborers, 75 cents an hour for common laborers, and 55 cents an hour for unskilled laborers. By today's standards, that would be $15.36, $13, and $9.54 an hour, respectively. The wings of the building were constructed first, and then the head house between them. A modest groundbreaking ceremony took place in June, and amazingly, by August of the same year, the foundation had been laid, and the both wings were fully framed. Well over 400 men worked multiple shifts through the long summer days in order to have the lodge completely roofed before the season's first accumulative snowfall in late autumn. Through the fall of 1936, construction at the lodge continued at a swift pace and continued through the winter and most of 1937. Marjorie Hoffman Smith, the assistant state director to the Federal Art Project, the visual arts arm of the WPA in Oregon, was hired as the interior design for the lodge in March of 1936, and she required that everything be made by hand and fall into the three main themes: Indian, wildlife, and pioneer. Throughout the lodge, these themes were expressed in many different ways, and each guest room was decorated so that no two were the same. Murals, paintings, and carvings for the lodge were commissioned from some of Oregon's most accomplished artists, including Darrell Austin, C.S. Price, Howard Sewall, Charles Heaney, Eric LeMade, Florence Thomas, Virginia Darcy, and Douglas Lynch. Smith integrated designs for wood furnishings, wrought iron detailing, and texture patterns to create a unique mountain resort. Two important objectives of the WPA were to develop independence through training and to encourage private enterprise. In 1976, Smith remembered carpenters became cabinet makers, blacksmiths became art metalworkers, and sewing women wound up expert drapery makers. Ray Newfer supervised the Oregon WPA woodworking shop that produced the furniture. Many of the workers who carved the newel posts were inexperienced carvers. In a radio program about the project, Newfer said most of the men came in from construction projects and they didn't know they could do some of the things they did. Most of them had been out of work a long time, then on construction jobs, and they had lost their self-confidence. Several architectural elements are repeated throughout the lodge. A curved post and lintel arc, looking rather like a haystack, is so prevalent in the lodge, appearing in many doorways and in chairs and mirrors, that it became known as the Timberline Arc or Arch. Hexagons also appeared throughout the lodge in the shape of coffee tables and the angled couches in the main lobby. And for some reason, just before I go to the next slide, for some reason, once again, I was unable to find a photo of Ray Newfer. So I tried looking, and it turns out there's a lot of people that go by that name. I tried, adding additional descriptions in, but I was unable to find a photo of Ray Newfer himself. But I was able to find a photograph of this man, who is Orion B. Dawson, supervised the metal shop, and his workers produced beautiful hand-wrought iron decorative details on doors, light fixtures, andirons, and gates. Dawson designed fireplace and andirons, I think that's how you say it, I'm not sure, screens and fire tools, and worked on the distinctive coyote head wrought iron gates to the Cascade dining room. Dawson later wrote in the Oregon Historical Quarterly that several motifs had been tried and rejected for the gates, but no one could agree on which elements to use. He remembered receiving a phone call from lead contractor Max Lawrence that triggered what must have been a frenetic workday in the blacksmith's shop. Max wanted to know if I had any ornamental motifs made. I told him that I had ornament motifs scattered all over the shop, but that none of the powers that be could decide what they wanted. Max said to forget what anyone else says. Put what ornament motifs you have in the gates and get them up here. So we did. Now, interestingly enough, because this was still during the height of the Great Depression, as you could probably very well imagine, women held few jobs, unfortunately, like many women weren't able to have, obviously many jobs in those days, but they held few jobs under the WPA, but many were employed by the Women's and Professional Project to sew appliques draperies, weave fabrics for bedspreads, and upholstery, and hook rugs for the lodge. Because only one member of a family could be employed by the WPA, the women's division employed mostly unmarried, divorced, or widowed women. The structure was built, as I said before, was built by hundreds of people eager to work after years of unemployment. 90% of the men and women who built and furnished the lodge were hired by the WPA, the federal agency created in 1933 to employ Americans idled by the Depression, Okay, well, you know what? I guess it's not, even though it's partially repeating a little bit what they're saying, they are saying this a little bit differently, but they also added a addition to this. The remaining 10% were foremen or skilled workers who taught others their skills. Timberline was designed in a similar rustic style to the national park lodges, with their asymmetrical design, the use of native materials, and a roughness reminiscent of pioneer craftsmanship. Underwood also suggested decorative pioneer and Indian themes, although no Native Americans were consulted in selection of so-called Indian motifs. Working with Underwood, U.S. Forest Service architects Tim Turner, Lynn Forrest, Howard Gifford, and Dean Wright. Well, it just seems like it's just I don't know what it is. It seems like it's repeating some of the stuff here. His original design for the lodge, drew the plans for Timberline, including sketches for the wrought iron detailing and some of the rustic wood furniture. His original design for the lodge focused on a central head house, which holds the 800-pound Great Stone Chimney, 800,000-pound Great Stone Chimney. The head house is flanked by the two uneven wings where the dining room, guest rooms, and other facilities are located. Timberline rose on the southern slope of Mount Hood, nearly 6,000 feet, 5,960 feet to be exact, above the sea, and 5,000 feet below Mount Hood's tip at 11,245 feet. Construction costs were about $1 million. Some private funds were used, but most were federal dollars. Of course, all of this was made possible by Roosevelt's Work Progress Administration and the men and women it employed, and as construction neared completion, the president would soon have the opportunity to witness the fruits of their labor firsthand. By early 1937, the exterior, for all intents and purposes, was complete, but there was much to be done inside. In the early fall of September 28th, 5 months before its public opening, President Franklin Roosevelt and First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt and other dignitaries arrived in Oregon to dedicate Bonneville Dam and Timberline Lodge. Welcomed by 1,200 community members, President Roosevelt dedicated Timberline Lodge and saluted the dedication and efforts of the joint venture between the Works Progress Administration and local citizens. They left Bonneville Dam in an opening tour car, accompanied by a motorcade of 40 vehicles. As they drove on the Mount Hood Loop Road, mounted Forest Service personnel lined up to salute and wave. After entering Timberline Lodge, Roosevelt took the elevator to the main floor and went out on the terrace overlooking the main entrance, facing south toward Mount Jefferson, now called the Roosevelt Terrace. Some interior details were not finished, but the bulk of the work was complete. He talked about the future recreational benefits of the lodge and emphasized the economic value of forests for timber, livestock, game, and water. This Timberline Lodge marks a venture that was made possible by WPA emergency relief work, he said, in order that we may test the workability of recreational facilities installed by the government itself and operated under its complete control. About 150 invited guests went inside for lunch and were entertained by members of the string ensemble of the WPA orchestra. Roosevelt himself stood on the steps of the lodge and addressed a sizable congregation with his dedication. I am here to dedicate Timberline Lodge as a monument to the skill and faithful performance of workers on the rolls of the Works Progress Administration, not only as a new adjunct of our national forests, but also as a place to play for generations of Americans in the days to come. The people of the United States are singularly fortunate in having such great areas of the outdoors in the permanent possession of the people themselves. Okay. Excuse me. Emerson J. Griffith turned the lodge over to the U.S. Forest Service in January 1938. Following a construction which boasted a great deal of public attention and excitement, Timberline Lodge celebrated its official grand opening to the public under operation by Timberline Lodge, Inc. on February 4th, with its first guests arrive for an overnight stay. Now, the Riblet Tramway Company engineered and constructed the Magic Mile chairlift, and the WPA built Silcock's warming hut at the top of the lift. The Magic Mile ascended to 7,000 feet. It was the longest chairlift in the world, the first chairlift in Oregon, and the second chairlift of those built to be one in North America when it opened in 1939, activating a thriving skiing movement on Mount Hood. The Magic Mile's original top terminal building has since been converted to the historical Silcock's Hut. For the next few years, business was brisk as tens of thousands of people came from far and wide to stay at the newly completed lodge. However, with the onset of World War II, visitation dropped off quickly, and by the summer of 1942, business was down 50%. So immediately after Labor Day of that year, the MHDA, who had been running the day-to-day operations since it opened, decided to close the lodge for the duration of the war as the nation faced difficult times. Quickly bouncing back at the end of the war, Timberline Lodge revealed the nation's second aerial passenger tram, the Skyway Aerial Tram. After it reopened in 1945, as well as being able to draw its first profits in 1947, the lodge and ski facilities over the next 10 years were not properly maintained and was poorly managed by a number of different entities, and even had to be closed again at one point because the power bill hadn't been paid. In the 1950s, there was a skywriting bus that served as a tram, carrying skiers and visitors between government camp and the resort. The Skiway Aerial Tram operated until 1953, when technical complications forced it to shut down. By the mid-50s, having degenerated under mismanagement into a den of iniquity, that turned a blind eye to gambling and prostitution, even as it left many of its bills unpaid, and the Forest Service revoked the operating permit in 1955. Due to financial complications and disrepair, Timberline Lodge closed for a few months. However, Timberline was threatened with permanent closure. So you guys can kind of see, even during at a time when the lodge was being built, especially since this was still at a time when the Great Depression was sky high. Nobody could work. Everybody was unemployed. Many of them lost their homes. It gave them certainly a perfect opportunity for, excuse me, for employment, to finally make some money. But it's just amazing to me that after when the hotel was finally, completed, that it just kept shutting down numerous times. I mean, understandably, yes, they had to shut it down during the height of when the U.S. entered World War II. There's no arguing about that. But just with a lot of the issues they had, like with paying bills and just trying to keep everything, under wraps, it's just, they obviously had a very difficult time keeping this place open, despite the amount of visitors that showed up at this place, from throughout the country, and so, if not some from even around the world. Within months, Richard L. Constam took over managing the lodge and was granted the permit, fortunately. Passionate that the lodge deserved one last chance, Constam was determined to convince the U.S. Forest Service to reopen the facility. Excuse me. Despite being an unlikely candidate with no background in the hospitality and industry, Constam became the new operator for the lodge and ski area on May 28th and worked tirelessly to develop the terrain. Under Constam's guidance, he cleaned up the lodge and reestablished ski education programs. He also added additional amenities, okay, including several more lifts, built an outdoor swimming pool in 1958, and planned festive events in a full convention center wing that made the lodge increasingly popular among Oregonians. I guess that's how you say it. In just 3 short years, the lodge was once again profitable. While Constam experienced financial challenges during the first years of operating Timberline Lodge, his endeavor proved to be rewarding when alpine skiing flourished and the lodge became a choice destination for winter sports enthusiasts. Summer skiing and summer race camps began at Timberline in 1956, and the ski area has successfully operated since then. By 1962, Silcox Hut was abandoned when the chairlift was moved west to escape snow accumulation, and demand was such that a new Miracle Mile chairlift was built that quadrupled the capacity of its predecessor. Friends of Silcox Hut renovated the hut in the early 1990s and added bunk rooms in the former lift area. In 1975, Friends of Timberline was established with a mission to restore Timberline Lodge to its original splendor and to preserve and celebrate the heritage of Timberline Lodge. This organization, along the U.S. Forest Service and the RLK and Company, put into a motion of collaborative stewardship that has preserved Timberline and its decorative arts ever since. That same year, convention facilities, the C.S. Price Wing, were added at the east end of the lodge, and the Y East Day Lodge was built across the parking lot in 1981 to provide services for skiers. 2 years later, on December 22nd, 1977, Timberline Lodge was designated a National Historic Landmark by the U.S. Department of Interior as the finest example of WPA mountain architecture. In 1978, Timberline Lodge became Oregon's 10th national landmark, formally acknowledging by its importance to the history of Oregon and the United States as a whole. During the summer, Timberline Lodge introduced the original Palmer chairlift, which facilitated the rush of global winter athletes to Mount Hood, quickly becoming the prime location for the summer training and ski season on May 8th. Now, as you could probably imagine, just like it has been for some other, particular locations we've spoken about, in the past, over the years, the lodge also gained considerable notoriety for being the backdrop for multiple Hollywood films. The most famous, of course, being once again Stanley Kubrick's 1980 film adaptation of Stephen King's masterpiece, The Shining, where the lodge was cast as the fictional Overlook Hotel. The film, which was based on the Stephen King novel of the same name, which was inspired by the Stanley Hotel in Colorado. And just to be clear on things, guys, because I know you guys are probably thinking, this is not part 3 of what we were talking about last time, because last show and the show before that, we were focusing on the Stanley Hotel. And of course, now we're focusing on, Timberline Lodge, which was one of the filming locations where The Shining was shot. But this isn't, in spite of this is not considered part 3. It just happens to be the same movie that this was actually where they shot the exterior shots of the movie. So, but there's more to this. There's more to it than that. So, might be a couple things here that you guys might not know about. When they started shooting this movie with the exteriors of Timberline Lodge. Several of the exterior shots in the film, which purport to show the lodge, such as those of the hedge maze and loading dock. However, the interior is nothing like what is portrayed in the film. In fact, the interior scenes were filmed at Elstree Studios in England, using a mock-up of the south face of the lodge that was modeled after another of Stanley Underwood's hotels, the Albany Lodge. There also is no hedge maze at the hotel. That too was created for the movie on a set in London, and hardly any level ground excuse me, and hardly any level ground at the Timberline Lodge. All interior shots were shot at Elstree Studios as well, and not at Timberline Lodge, which kind of does make sense. I mean, Timberline Lodge is, pretty big, hotel, but considering the fact that Stanley Kubrick was looking for, wide shots of, a really huge hotel, something tells me, I guess Timberline Lodge just did not provide, those type of wide shots where you could, where you can get a wide view and have long, such long distances. So I could see why they only shot the exterior of it. Now, interestingly, get this, guys. Kubrick was asked not to depict room 217 featured in the book In the Shining because future guests at the lodge might be afraid to stay there. So a non-existent room 237, if you guys remember, was substituted in the film. Curiously and somewhat ironically, room 217 is requested more than any other room at Timberline, which that kind of took me by surprise upon hearing that, because before I learned that there was a non-existent room 237, which I would have expected that would be the room everybody would want to check into, which first off doesn't exist. After the request of not having 217, you got people who show up and want to rent that room anyway. Before the Palmer chairlift was constructed, oh, wait a minute. Okay, there it is. Before the Palmer chairlift was constructed in 1983, which provided access above the 7,000-foot level, the conditions at Timberline allowed skiing from the mile November through July or August. The construction of the current Palmer Express chairlift was completed in 1996 and is built to withstand wind gusts of over 100 miles per hour and 200 inches of snow. Its construction time was less than 6 months due to a limited building season imposed by the local weather conditions. The chairlift gave Timberline Lodge the longest ski season in North America. Sadly, Constam died in 2006, and his family continues to operate the lodge through RLK and Company. The Jeff Flood Express detachable high-speed quad share opened for the 2007 to 2008 ski season. With the new lift, Timberline added the Still Creek Basin to skiable terrain on the lower mountain, which almost doubles the area below the Timberline, which provides much-needed capacity on days with wind or limited visibility when the Magic Mile and Palmer are unable to open. Jeff Flood also improves connectivity to Storm and Norman and Magic Mile lifts from the lower mountain, thanks to the added terrain accessible from Jeff Flood. If the Palmer lift is open, it is possible to ski a nonstop run over 3.5 miles in length, with elevation change of about 4,000 feet. Today, Timberline Lodge has hosted world-renowned athletes, dignitaries, and has been featured in a variety of films, like I said, including The Shining. The Constam family remains passionate with its collaboration with the U.S. Forest Service to preserve and celebrate the Timberline Lodge and the Mount Hood region while providing excellent service and comfortable accommodations. Celebrating its 80th anniversary in 2017, Timberline Lodge is a symbol of historic preservation, genuine hospitality, and recreation. It hosts more than 2 million visitors each year. As of 2019, information has been leaked that there will eventually be a gondola that connects Summit's ski area to Timberline Lodge. Not much is known about this project except for the fact that it could be completed in the next 10 years. Now, in spite of a relatively stressful but somewhat peaceful history, and of course, despite its association with the film The Shining, of course, it does have a partial darker side, which sadly I wasn't able to find too much revolving paranormal stories. But many believe that Timberline Lodge is also believed to be haunted. Although these days the U.S. Forest Service has worked hard to make sure that skiers and climbers are safe on the mountain, during the lodge's earlier years, as in the case with many others, several accidents were known to have occurred both by skiing and climbing. Some employees of this mountain lodge claim that the first aid room, as well as the entire ski resort, is haunted by skiers and climbers who never made it off and died on Mount Hood. There are some stories of ghostly activity in the older section of the hotel. And I hate to say this, guys, but that's actually kind of much of the ghost stories I was able to find of the place. It's weird. I tried going on a couple different websites to try to find more ghost stories associated with Timberline Lodge. There was only like maybe one or two websites that really talked about any paranormal activity that does occur at the lodge. The only other thing that I was able to find was not actually from a website or information, but it was actually from a well-known singer who had made a visit to the lodge about 20 years ago. It was actually, what was her name? It was at that time, kind of like teen pop and rock singer Avril Lavigne, who had appeared on one of the, on a talk show and revealed that she and either her family or friends actually spent the night at Timberline Lodge back in, I believe it was about 20 years ago. So I believe it was somewhere between 2000, 2001, or maybe 2002. And they ended up staying in one of the upper regions of the lodge. And they did say that they did hear they were aware about that the resort was haunted. They said that during the night they thought they did hear footsteps, which later turned out that there was nobody up on that particular floor. I guess they must have arrived at a time when they just didn't really have that many guests during that part of the year. But they did say they did hear, footsteps, strange noises, whatsoever. And they later found out from the staff that there was nobody up there. And that's when they eventually told more stories that the lodge was said to be haunted. So, but that was really the only other thing I could really find regarding ghost stories at the Timberline Lodge. So that basically concludes the presentation for today. So hopefully you guys all enjoyed it. I'm probably going to end a few minutes early. However, I would like to see what everyone's been saying. So let's see. I'm going to give a shout out for everybody here. And then actually I'm going to show one other thing for you guys. Hey, what's going on, Karma? Good to see you. Hello, Nigel. I appreciate it, Nigel. Thank you. What's going on, Jill? I think I already said hello to you earlier. Let's see who else. What's up, Irene? Good to see you, Charles. Hey, guys, it's in place. I don't know what that means. Yeah, I have no idea what that means. I'm sorry. Okay. What's up, Christian? Good to see you. Let's see who we got. I was there in April one year and the snow was up to the third floor. I've seen pictures of, you know what? I'm not surprised. Okay, maybe that's what he was trying to say. I've seen pictures of what the lodge looks like when there's a huge amount of snow. And I've never seen such a place where a building is just like half of it is covered, by snow. It's just incredible. And you could see that too in The Shining. It does get covered quite a bit. Facebook user, check out my reels. I'm not sure who this is, but you got to give StreamYard permission to allow me to see your name. I don't know. yeah, if you can do that, I'll be able to. I'm otherwise, I'm not going to sure. I'm not sure who this is. I'm going to have to check now. And let me just check on another page because again, for some reason, StreamYard just doesn't show all the comments from all the pages that you broadcast on. So, what's up, Jason? Good to see you. Tonia, hello. Robert's still been watching. I know that we were there. The icicles were double the size of a tall man, at least 12 feet in length on the roof. Oh my God. Motifs, that's unbelievable. She might be the reason behind the Crown Point woman's toilet. I'm not sure what to say about that. What's up, Chantel? Good to see you. Too small inside of Timber. Oh, I think that's when Robert was. I think that's in regards to when I was talking about how they were shooting the film, The Shining, when they just could not film it inside. All right. Well, I don't know where Brad is, but because we kind of ended early, I thought I'd show this to you guys because he mentioned about this in the chat. So I got maybe just a few more minutes just before I go off. But what Brad was talking about in the comments early was, as some of you guys know, we were on an investigation last week at Wildwood Sanitarium, which I do plan on making a presentation eventually on. But Brad was nice enough to give me this. Hopefully, okay, good. The green screen is showing it. He made this for me. It is a music box, which was very nice that he made this for me. Has the logo to it. Sorry, Crack Skull Paranormal, and of course he told me I had to choose a particular song for this music box to play, and I basically had a particular one. And funny enough, it's something that we've spoken about in one of our previous presentations. So I'm just going to play a quick sample of it, and you guys are going to know this immediately. And it works great. The first time I used it at Wildwood was totally worth using. So guess what I guess you guys are going to know what this is really very quickly. Tubular Bells. It only goes on for just a few seconds. It's not going to play the whole thing, of course. But first time using it was totally perfect. So, Brad, if you're still on, once again, I just want to say thank you so much for this. I mean, I can't thank you enough for this. All right, so I really got not much else coming really to talk about. So I'm probably gonna end this. But for next week's episode, our next location is let me check the list. So bear with me for just a minute. And I better hurry soon because unfortunately, despite me charging, my phone is dying, as it always does. So give me a second. We got. No, wait, no, that's not it. Well, guys, I guess you're gonna find this kind of crazy, but it's actually gonna be one of the other hotels that we were briefly talking about for today's show. And once again, yes, it is another film, a place associated with the Shining, but it's the last one that I have, involving that film or the story otherwise, and that is going to be the Albany Hotel. So, yeah, that'll be next week's episode, and I'm not sure what's going on with Supernatural Talk tomorrow night. I think we might have a guest on. It's kind of been a busy week for me, so I'm not entirely sure who we have on. I believe we have I believe we have someone on, if I'm correct. And then also for the 13th Dimension this upcoming Friday, I'm actually excited about this one. We have Elliot and Nat ACG of ACG Paranormal who are going to be our guests on Friday. And considering that they live only an hour away from me, that they're local investigators, really excited to have them on. I'm great friends with them. I can't wait. And then also, actually, there is one final announcement because all this talk about these upcoming episodes of these shows, starting next week, we have a new show that's going to be joining the Things Network starting Tuesday. It's going to be on Tuesday. We haven't come up with a name yet for it, but put it this way. Starting next Tuesday, I'm going to be hosting and co-hosting not one, but 4 shows in a week. Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, and Friday nights. So for the new show for Tuesday night, like I said, we don't have a name for it yet, but it's going to start at 8:30 p.m. Central Time. And the show is actually going to be hosted by Don Elmy, who's one of my best friends, who I've known for now well over 15 years. In fact, the first time I met him was actually at a ghost tour. So he's also someone who lives locally around this area. And the show we're planning on doing, it's going to be a podcast series in which we're going to be talking about, and it's something, of course, he and I, love chatting about, of course. I mean, we will be talking about paranormal stuff here and there, but we're actually going to be talking more about horror movies. He's been wanting to start a podcast series involving chats with horror movies. So it's going to be a lot of fun. He's excited about it. But like I said, that's going to start at 8:30 next Tuesday night. I'll be co-hosting with him. And over the course of, the first couple episodes, it's just going to be me and him. But as time progresses, we're going to start inviting probably like a few of our local friends. And then eventually we're going to start inviting other show hosts here on this network, as well as some of the other networks, to take part on these conversations. So the show is only just going to be an hour, but I don't know. I mean, I know Don. Don Elmy. He's still putting this whole thing together. He's already written down a few ideas of what on particular episodes. But definitely, stay tuned and check out the news show for next Tuesday. Hopefully, we'll have the name soon. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be really exciting. I really cannot wait for this. So I know he's really looking forward to it. So, and also, in case you guys are interested, Don Elmy also has a YouTube channel in which he does like a lot of movie reviews and reactions, both good and bad, not just for horror movies, but also for certain other types of genres. But his favorite, like me, is usually horror films. So make sure to go check out his channel. But anyways, with that being said, I'm going to end it for today. As always, guys, like I said, I can't thank you guys enough. You guys are the reason why I always, I do these shows. I know a lot of you guys enjoy a lot of the history, a lot of the ghost stories, but like I said, I can't thank you guys enough. And we're almost up to episode 20, which feels like to me, it still isn't enough, even though I began this back in January. So, it's just been it's been definitely a great ride. So, I'm definitely looking forward to it, of course, not only for this new show, but, for our next episode next week. So, but again, I can't thank you guys enough for it. So anyways, let's see, Jill just said something. Thanks, Jill. Really, really appreciate it. But yeah, like I said, with that being said, I'm going to get off. I'm going to end this, and I will see some of you guys tomorrow night on Supernatural Talk. And for others who'd rather wait for the next episode of the Nick Files, I will see some of you guys then next week. You guys all have a great night.